Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Research Ethics interview series. I'm Hakan Ergül. These are short interviews where we focus on the researchers' experiences and reflections about the ethics in their own research context. Today, my guest is Dr. Karen Wilkes. Hello, Karen.
Good morning.
Good morning. And Karen and I collaborate on many things, don't we, Karen, including teaching and research in the MA Digital Media Critical Studies program, and that is in the Department of Culture, Communication and Media at the UCL's IOE. So I'm really excited to hear more about your recent project, Karen, that I know that you're doing something really important and timely. But before we starting that, could you start by giving us a brief overview of your own research interest?
Okay, good morning again. Thank you for inviting me to participate, Hakan. It's a really good opportunity to reflect. And so my research interests are quite broad. And I guess I'd summarize it by saying that a lot of my work is about visual culture and the power of the visual and critiquing discourses about things that we take for granted. So in particular, I'm interested in representation and colonial discourses and discourses about power and about how power is represented in kind of common sense and normalized ways. And so in my previous work, I've pretty much looked at representations in advertising and kind of a lot of popular culture. So my original thesis, my PhD work, was on tourist brochures of the Caribbean, and particularly looking at representations of the Caribbean through tourist discourses and tourism discourses, but looking at how the historical context was key to forming those discourses of paradise and those myths about paradise. So that's where my work has started off, and then I've progressed on to looking at representations of whiteness and looking at how ideas of white femininity, particularly in food culture. So that's one of my current projects, really looking at food cultures and how whiteness is disseminated through online platforms.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Karen. That's quite a diverse sort of research interest, but there are some overarching interests about the representation, the power, inequalities within that space. I can sense that too. And I think this is also linked to the research that you have recently started. And I know that that's a very important and very timely research. Why don't you tell us a bit about that, its context, its purpose, why your participants, why you're doing this work?
So thank you, Hakan. So the work that I'm currently doing is quite a broad project about visual representations of gentrification, and how it connects to my previous work is looking at the way in which tourism is being used to facilitate gentrification. So I'm particularly interested in looking at gentrification in London, and really how the tourism is key to facilitating different types of gentrification. So that's where the broader project is. And in the course of looking at what's happening in London, what's interesting is there are lots of accounts of how gentrification impacts on communities, and those conversations have largely taken place with adults. And so I was interested in exploring what children have to say about their experiences of gentrification. So I'm particularly interested in exploring this now because of how gentrification seems to be accelerating at such a quick pace in many areas of London. So that's why I particularly am interested in working with children on this project, is to understand what they have to say about it. Because, as I say, largely the work that I've come across has been with adults. So yeah, it does raise a lot of practical and ethical issues.
Of course.
But that's what I'm interested in.
Of course, yes. Can you tell us a bit more about the age group that you are interested in particularly?
So I'm particularly interested in working with young children. So one of the things that I learned through the course of the research, and in the IOE we have lots of experts who've worked with children, and I think I was actually inspired by a lot of the work that's already been done, and some of the researchers in the Knowledge Lab and the IOE have done research with children as young as 5 and 6. And it made me think that actually it is possible to do research with children, and what they can tell us is really quite groundbreaking, and how it can inform us about our practices and where we're going wrong. So it made me think that it would be possible to do research with children perhaps as young as 9 and 10. And I wanted to work with children who were that age before school, really. I guess I think it was before they reach, I guess, the influence of bigger peer groups, and I wanted to sort of capture that moment of before broader influences come into their lives, I guess, is before they're before they hit senior school.
Right. Yeah. Yes, please go ahead.
So that was the reason why I wanted to work with that age group. Also, before I did my PhD, I worked in youth work, and so I also worked in a school. So I had some insight into working with children, and the insights that they can give us into the way that systems actually work.
Right.
So understanding how speaking to them and having dialogues with children in a way that is from their perspective. So when I previously worked in a school, I was a learning mentor. So really the purpose of my role there was as much as possible to see situations from their point of view. And I think that has enabled me, has given me some insight into really how to do that. So in a way, that's one of the reasons why at the moment the project is quite open, and I didn't want to be too prescriptive. So that, I'll talk a little bit more about that, but that was one of the difficulties, I think, of writing the ethics form, because it needed to be that open, so as not, I guess, to put restrictions or to start confining them by determining what I wanted to find out, because that's the whole point, that I wanted it to be open so that they would tell us what they think, not me going in with preconceived ideas about what was happening to them.
Right. Well, you have this experience, in the past, that you have worked with the children, with the youth that you have mentioned also. And I think anyone who kind of collaborated with the children in a qualitative research particularly would agree that, they are amazing. So they are extremely creative, resourceful, and, they have plenty of different ideas, sometimes different than the researchers themselves too. So there are some also unique challenges that come together with collaborating with the children in a sort of qualitative research context. What would you say about that aspect particularly? What were the most challenging things that you encountered when you were preparing your ethics application before you start your fieldwork?
So I think the most challenging thing was, for me, trying to anticipate the types of things that the reviewers would question me about, and trying to think through those things in the course of writing the application. So that's what I found particularly challenging, because they want child safeguarding, as I had trained, many years ago, but I knew the kind of issues about safeguarding that they would want to be mindful of, that would be taken into consideration with the research. And so, this was an issue that came up when I was speaking to colleagues actually as well. It's about how to safeguard children, because the methods that I wanted to use also posed questions. So I wanted the children to do the filming, and for them to really lead on that. And so to preempt some of those issues, I decided, right, okay, we're not going to be filming each other. We're not, it's going to basically be about filming your environment and not each other, and protecting, their faces and their identities. So one of the things that I was quite aware of is what will happen to that data after the children have finished, and that, that how things that they might believe or say, they may change those views later on. Their feelings might change. And so what I didn't want was for potentially that data or anything that they've created to be used against them later on, that might cause them problems in the future. And so that was one of the reasons why I was concerned that they shouldn't, the filming should focus on the environment and not themselves. So how that works out is going to be interesting, because cameras and filming is not alien to children of this age group. So so that's one of the challenges that I had to take into account when I was preparing.
Right. Well, that's really, really insightful, Karen. I'm also trying to imagine the context where you'll be working with the children. You're planning to collect data through the children's gaze, through the children's understanding and perspective. Yeah. And you want to do that by giving them some, the sort of media, so that they can record those visuals and then talk about it and then bring them to you as a sort of the data. But, I can also imagine that it doesn't happen immediately, that you go and then you provide the devices and then they come back with what you were looking for. So how are you planning to ensure that they understand what they are expected to do? For instance, is there a kind of training phase before?
Yeah. So there were 2 phases of the project that was set out in the ethics application. So the first phase would be 2 workshops where we'd introduce the project and talk about settlements, the cities as settlements, and understanding that what land use happens in cities, and talk about the buildings and the use of buildings, the structure and the history of buildings, and how the formation of those structures has an impact on the way that people behave, what they get used for. And so one of the key things was to try to link that in with the curriculum, so that it wouldn't be something that was alien, that they would be familiar with some of the vocabulary and understand, well, why we're doing this. But I think key for me is to link it to their experience, that and how to look. So one of the things that I guess this links in with my previous work is how to look, and how to look at things in detail, and how to look at things in context of different phenomena. So looking at how, for example, the land use is connected to the types of businesses that are there, the green spaces, the types of traffic, where the traffic flows, and all of those kinds of things, and how they experience them. So that was what I was quite keen to do, is to link it to what they're currently learning, but also as part of their art and design curriculum, that being able to record what they see. So they're the kind of tools that I wanted to project to offer them, because one of the questions that we were asked was, what benefit is this project going to give to the children? And so I was mindful of that, those questions about the positionality of the researcher, and the research is not just a process of extraction.
Absolutely right. No. Yeah, I mean, that's one of the main issues, right, that we face before we start even any kind of qualitative research. That's really important aspect. But from what you said, I understand that there were layers of ethical, let's say, the stages, or like sort of the steps that you needed to think in advance and prepare yourself before you start in collaborating and introducing the research to the children, and then, and start your field work. So in that sense, when you were preparing your ethics application, of course, you got the approval, and this included also the review process. How did you find the review process itself? Was it useful for your, thinking?
Yeah, so the review process was very helpful. So there were many questions that they asked. So we had 2 reviews of the application, and so you're given the reviews in a written document, and then at a fixed time period of which you need to respond. And so it was quite. I think what I had already anticipated is that when the reviews come back, to try and factor the time in to actually address those concerns. And of course, you have no idea of what the reviewers are necessarily going to say. So it's just to be mindful, I guess, of that you do need to be cogent of the fact that you might get a lot of questions of which you need to address. Within the stipulated time. And I did find it useful. I would say that in my case, it did take a long time to address each concern, because I had two reviews. But what I found useful was what the suggestion that was made to invite parents into the school to ask questions about the research. So that's one of the things that I do hope that we will be able to do. So we've discussed this with the school, and they're in agreement. So that was one of the things that I found that was helpful that they suggested.
Right. Fantastic. Yes. Please go ahead.
That was one of the things. And also to make clear what the benefits of the research would be to the children. So I had already felt that I was building that into the project, but I don't think I'd made it explicit enough, that we would be showing the children how to use the cameras, how to film, and ensuring that it was an extension of their learning, but they would also be learning new things, and also questions about their own social world, and thinking about their place in it. So that was one thing for me that I think, yes, I hadn't actually made that explicit enough. That didn't come across in the application. And when I went back and reviewed it, made sure that was something that was quite prominent, made it clear in the application that this is what I hoped for the children to get out of the project.
Right. Yes. I mean, it's never possible to predict everything that a research like this can in later on. But one thing that I'm almost certain about is that the children, your participants, will definitely remember that experience later in their life, and then reflect back on that amazing the research. I just wanted to ask you as a final question. Now, when you've already provided information about that, but just in case you would like to just underline and reiterate things for those who are planning to start the research, planning to collaborate with children, particularly in a vulnerable context, what would be one to, let's say, advice you would give them when they are preparing their ethics application? I understand that time is one thing that they have to factor in.
Yeah.
What else? Yes.
Yeah, so certainly time. I can't emphasize that enough. I mean, I would say it took me about a month really to write that application, because the amount of guidance and advice that there is on the IOE website, it's phenomenal. And to go through all of that and to digest it all and, make sense of it, it does take time. Also talking to colleagues as well. So processing all of that information and then ensuring that, you can accommodate it all in your application. I would say I wouldn't underestimate how long that actually takes. I would say the IOE website is brilliant for the resources that are available on there. So for consent forms, sample forms, different styles of work, how to phrase the forms and the information sheets. I would make use of that material that's on there. What I would also say is there's a process that precedes the application, and that is the DBS clearance. So you need governmental clearance if you're working with children in the UK. And this is one of the things that, having worked in the field of youth work, that I was aware of. So many years ago, I'd had my clearance, but it has to be renewed. So this process can take anything from a few weeks. It can maybe take longer than a month. So before you even start completing the ethics application, I would advise that you do the DBS. And do that as soon as you think that you might want to be doing research with children, because you just have no idea how long it's going to take to process that application.
Right.
The other thing I would say about that is it does provide, I guess, some indication to the reviewers that you are aware of the issues that might come up, and that if you have your clearance, by the time that you submit the application, it does give them an indication that actually that you are in some way equipped to do the research. So they're the first two things that I would say before you start.
Right. Thank you so much. I think these are really great advice. I'm going to definitely take them on board when I start my research project with the children. Thank you very much, Karen. And thanks everyone for watching today's conversation. And our guest was Dr. Karen Wilkes. Again, thank you very much for sharing your insights and reflections, Karen. I'm sure it's going to be very useful for the colleagues who are, going to do the similar kind of work in the future. And see you in the next interview. Goodbye.
Thank you, Hakam. Thanks. Bye. Bye.
Bye-bye.